What's happening here in Pierce County has happened all over the country when it comes to term limits. In Nashville, Tennessee, they passed term limits in 1994. They passed it again in 1996 by defeating a measure that the council put on the ballot. They passed it again in 1998 by defeating another measure that the council put on the ballot. They passed it again, I believe, I could be wrong, it was either 2000 or 2002, for the fourth time because the council kept putting it on the ballot. Same is true in Tampa, Florida, where they passed term limits. Other places in New York City, they passed term limits. The council put it back on the ballot to try to repeal it. They couldn't do it. The voters again endorsed it. This time, Mayor Bloomberg and the city council simply passed a law outlawing it without going back to the voters. What we're seeing is that the folks who are supposed to represent us don't have the same attitude about being a good sport when they lose. When we lose an election as citizens, we may not like it, but we move on. Our elected officials ought to do the same thing. And they ought to not spend their time rigging the system so that they get to stay in longer, or that they get to decide who gets to run or how the voting process happens. They ought to be listening to the voters and trying to do the right thing. The three measures here are all connected, but especially the first measure. You would think that a measure on term limits and a measure about when you hold the election would not get lumped together. So why have they been lumped together? I think it's to hide the fact that they're trying to keep themselves in office longer. I believe it's 3 of the council members will get to serve longer if this passes. But that's not what they're debating. Like I said earlier, if they came out and said, you know what, we don't like term limits, we want to repeal them, or we don't like 8-year term limits, we think they ought to be 12. Well, let's have an honest debate about that. But that's not what they're doing. They're hiding their extension of term limits inside what year we ought to have the election. That's not right. And here's the sign they have. It says, repeal ranked choice voting. Approve 1, 2, and 3. But ranked choice voting is only 3. When are they going to have the signs that say, make our term limits longer, approve 1? You know when they're going to have those signs? Never. Never.